and welcome to this webinar organized by the UIA's UN 17 SDGs Commission. My name is Iman Gawed. I'm a professor of sustainable architecture in Egypt and the co-director of the commission. I will be moderating this webinar together with my colleagues Sid Blanco and Nabil Moher. We are thrilled to have you with us today as we introduce an impactful new initiative, the Atlas of Sustainable Development Goals Implementation Metric. This project represents a crucial tool for aligning architectural practice and urban planning with the UN's Sustainable Development Goals. I am pleased to announce that we have 5 distinguished panelists with us today, each representing a different UIA region. These experts will share insights and experiences from their respective regions, highlighting how this new atlas can be tailored to meet distinct local challenges and opportunities. But before we delve into our panel discussion, it's my great honor to introduce Regina Gonthier, the UIA president. We are very fortunate to have her today, and she will provide us with valuable insight into the vision behind this endeavor. Please join me in welcoming Regina Gonthier. The floor is yours, Regina.
Thank you, Iman. Dear participants, dear colleagues, dear friends, it is a great pleasure to address you today as President of the UIA at the opening of this webinar organized by the Sustainable Development Goals Commission of the International Union of Architects. The Commission's mission has been to promote the UN 17 Sustainable Development Goals and the 2030 Agenda. At a time when the UN has issued a clear warning that the world is falling short of these goals, the work of the Commission is more crucial than ever. By 2050, 2/3 of the global population are expected to live in urban areas, which are the largest consumers of energy and materials and the greatest producers of waste. Environmental degradation, climate and disaster risks, public health issues, housing shortages, and rising inequalities are among the most visible challenges of rapid urbanization. The building sector alone accounts for more than 1/3 of global energy consumption and emissions. We cannot afford to ignore these realities. While progress has been made, this year's UN Sustainable Development Goals report makes it clear that it is not enough. Only 17% of SDG targets are on track, with over 1/3 stalled or even regressing. We are living in turbulent times. Beyond the climate crisis, we are still struggling with the effects of the pandemic in some areas, frequent natural disasters in many places of the world, political instability, conflicts, wars across many regions. All of these factors contribute to the poor progress we are witnessing. As we stand at this critical point, it is essential to recognize the insights and expertise of architects whose contributions are key to achieving sustainable development. The SDG targets reflect a political compromise, and they are at a pivotal moment as their relevance is being questioned and their review will begin in 2027. This is when the UA must contribute to shaping their future. It will be a very important moment, and we will have to point out the pivotal role of architecture and importance of a development that respects progress while preserving culture, heritage, inclusion, and diversity. Your webinar today, focusing on success stories and urgent calls for action across the 5 regions, is a vital contribution to the ongoing reflection on how local priorities can feed into the global sustainability agenda. I wish you all a productive event filled with very meaningful discussions that further highlight the essential role of architects in driving this agenda forward. Thank you very much and lots of success.
Thank you, Regina, for this inspiring open speech. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our 5 esteemed panelists, each bringing unique insights from their regions and professional backgrounds. The first panelist is Professor Dr. G. Owen Lewis, representing UIA Region 1. Professor Lewis brings a wealth of expertise in sustainable development and environmental impact, offering insights that highlight Europe's approach to integrating sustainable design and policy. We have also Professor Dr. Jihad Farah from UIA Region 2. Professor Farah will share perspectives from the Middle East, emphasizing how we can address pressing local challenges in rapidly urbanizing cities. Also representing UIA Region 3 is Dr. Jesus D'Alessandro, with his expertise in urban development and sustainability in Latin America. Dr. Alessandro contributions will shed light on how we can support equitable urban growth and sustainable practices in diverse Latin American contexts. From UIA Region 4, we are honored to have architect Yvonne Leong from Hong Kong. With her experience in sustainable architecture in Asia, she will provide invaluable also insight that aligns with the unique environmental and social landscape of her region. And finally, representing UIA Region 5, we welcome Professor Dr. Hassan Radwan, whose expertise in African urbanism and sustainability will enrich our understanding of how the Atlas can empower communities to address regional challenges within the African continent. And now I hand it to my colleague, Dr. Nabil Muharib.
It's a pleasure having all of you here, and thank you, Iman. And I would like also to thank all the moderators, Sid, Iman, and myself that we're going to handle this. Sid, if you'd like to have a few words, you're still with us, right?
You're muted, Sid.
You're muted.
I'm bored in the bill, but I'm still here.
Yes, of course. We'd like to have, if you'd like to add a few words.
I'd just like to thank everybody for joining us, especially our distinguished guests. Thank Regina for joining us, and especially you and Ima for putting this all together. And it's a pleasure to see that we have people working and fighting for in the very short time still achieve some of the goals that we know. That's like Regina said, the reports, they point that we are struggling to achieve them. But this doesn't matter, that we are not going to still trying to fight. As an architect and urban planning, we have responsibility on that. So really thank you and congratulations for the organization of the webinar.
Thank you very much. So let me discuss a little bit about why this webinar is so important, about the Atlas of Sustainable Development Goals Implementation Metrics 3+3 project. It's considering the SDGs 6, 9, 11, and 15, and even beyond. It's about, when you think that 2030 is just a few years coming, like less than 5 years, and we didn't accomplish all what we need from all the SDGs. So that's why the Atlas of Sustainable Development Goals Implementation Metrics is really important at this point, because we are addressing projects that are well implemented and we can learn from, in addition to projects that we need to understand why they are not, or they are needed, but they are not implemented, and we need to understand why they're not implemented and how to facilitate or understand a way to implement them. So it's an urgent call for accelerated action. So it's this initiative aims to harness collective insights worldwide, integrating local realities and values with global sustainable agendas through the unique participatory approach. So as you can see here, we are discussing unrealized projects and successful projects. And how this webinar will going to be, this webinar is about discussion. We have 5 experts from the 5 main regions, and we're going to have like set of questions, and these questions were going to be rotated. We're going to have some presentations. In addition, of course, Q&A from the audience addressing our expert. So it is not about just a presentation, it's a discussion based. So moving to Iman, if you'd like to start with the first set of questions, if you wish.
Yes, so we'll transition into our panel discussion now, where we will dive into several core topics that shape the future of sustainable development. The first one is targeting the role of SDGs in needed and implemented projects. To briefly describe this theme, it's the role that SDGs play in shaping both necessary projects and those already underway. So I will ask the question and panelists will intervene whenever needed. The first question is, what are the top 3 projects identified as necessary for advancing global SDGs priorities, but have not yet been realized? And what barriers are currently preventing their implementation? We will take the hands of the panelists. I see Owen willing to intervene. And then we have Gitus.
All right, Iman, maybe I will start off then, if I may. And to take a regional focus, within the European region, we of course have a considerable diversity of responses to the SDG challenges. And one issue which is live in my country is the issue of how we build. Our tradition is to build in concrete. We have a lot of timber, and we have increasing amounts of timber becoming available, but it's not part of our tradition. So we have looked at other areas, and maybe if I try and share an image.
Would you like me to share, Professor Luz?
Well, I'm going to try to see if I can get it there.
Yes, I think yes.
We can see.
Can you see? Can you see this?
Yes.
Yeah.
If it's in the presenter's mode, it will be better.
It would be if I can. How do I do that?
It's at the like beside the clock. Yes, this one.
Yes, yeah, it was.
It doesn't matter.
Oh, it would be better though. Let's see. There we are.
Yes, this
Yes.
one. Okay.
Is that better?
Yes.
Right. This is a very large group, a village really, a student village in Tampere in Finland, which is currently, it's under construction. I took some of these construction images on the right-hand side just a couple of weeks ago. It's useful in showing that timber technology can be used in substantial buildings, and the technology here is Estonian technology. On the bottom right, you see a factory, not necessarily making these particular units, but the industrialization of these, making for rapid construction on site, providing for the construction team a comfortable working environment. Another building at this time in Tallinn in Estonia, this is a very large, what I would call a secondary school, with extensive use of 3-dimensional timber in the envelope, a lot of glued laminated timber. But what I'm trying to get at here, is how technologies, there are experience elsewhere, but in my country, we're not allowed to build timber higher than 3 stories. We don't have a tradition, even though we now have the material available. So this, I think, is an illustration of a project which is underway. We now have a national initiative, so we have 4 ministries and all parts of the industry working together to overcome the obstacles like fire regulations, insurance requirements, in industrial production capacity. So a lot of activities underway to address the barriers to this necessary project.
Thank you, Owen. I can see also Jesus and then Jihad raising their hands. Jesus, please.
Hi, thank you very much for the invitation. I want to say that drawing from the Sustainable Development Report 2024, those SDGs that show to be stagnated or face major challenges and significant challenges for the region of Latin America and the Caribbean are no poverty, zero hunger, and good health and well-being. And you can also add decent work, reduced inequalities, sustainable cities, life below water and life on land as well. And I wanted to say that however critical these aspects might seem, we need to consider that these goals don't exist disconnected from those where progress has been seen. For example, the growing environmental awareness among populations that catalyze climate action, for example, which is one of the SDGs that showed dynamism, also create the basis for addressing long-term challenges linked to the sustainable cities and communities and life below water and on land. Investment in sustainable cities showed certain dynamism in the region. When you study the data country by country, it is known that when cities improve their capability to elevate people's quality of life, their economy improves since multi-scale private investment and entrepreneurship follows. This connect this SDG number 11 to no poverty, zero hunger, good health and well-being, decent work, and reduced inequalities. What I want to say here is that as critical as these challenges might seem, they are connected to other lines of work that have shown dynamism, for which I wouldn't be that pessimistic about it.
Thank you, Jesus. Jihad, please.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation and for the introduction. Going back on the SDGs and specifically the 4 SDGs that have been mentioned by Nabil, I believe to be able to address these SDGs, there's a need of a change of perspective. In fact, the way still a lot of our discipline as architecture and urban planning works, and also as regulation works, as has been mentioned by Owen, they are not really adapted to deal with these particular challenges. In fact, focusing on cities, because I'm more familiar with this particular entry, I would say that, let's say, modern urban planning that still dominates a lot of the aspects of the production of the city is focused on motorized transportation and on universal infrastructure development. This means this model has been developed in the context of, let's say, rich countries and in a time of plenty. And it's based on the idea that we will always have energy to put within this infrastructure. We'll always have water to put within this infrastructure, and to feed the fuel to cars for the city to work. However, as we know more and more, and this does not work in the context of a lot of poorer countries, and in an era that's marked by a lot of crisis. So it's not a resilient model really. And from the angle of the Middle East specifically, and I believe what's needed is more, let's say, a metabolic approach, a metabolic look on the city that focuses specifically on the entries of these SDGs, which is water, basically, how we can address the question of water, but also other important aspects like food, like energy. These are metabolic aspects in the city. So how we will be able to address them, how to address them, specifically in the Middle East, where as you know, water scarcity is a problem even before climate change. And we depend a lot on food, on our importation. So this is also a big problem for our cities and for our security and sustainability. Though we have also cheap energy, relatively cheap energy compared with other areas, it's not sustainable energy that we have. So building sustainable communities in this context is really difficult within, let's say, the disciplinary and regulatory frameworks we have. This is not to say that there's not a lot of experiences there. There's not a lot of different approaches that are possible. There's approaches that could, for example, address regarding water's sponge city approach, the permeable city approach. There's a lot of nature-based solutions that are possible. There's for energy, there's at the international level, there's a lot of, let's say, local energy production collectives that could be developed even in urban areas using rooftops and other systems. And there's, of course, also the local food networks and all. These does not really, let's say, solve the solution necessarily. There's, of course, there should be a more national, international levels and national, international policies. However, they make cities more resilient. And I believe this is important. Now, regarding the barriers to be able to implement these kind of approaches, the barriers are first at the level of the, let's say, the conception. Our disciplines are still, let's say, focused on the traditional way of thinking of the city, which basically through urban form and less through urban networks, urban fluxes, which are more important to look into. And even the regulatory system is also based on the urban form and less on urban policies of water, of food, etc., etc. These are domains that are being developed, and there are initiatives at this level. However, there should be a different regulatory perspective to support change at this level. So this is my rapid point of view on that.
Thanks, Jihad. And I share the same region as yourself, and I completely agree with you. Let's hear the Region 4 perspective from Yvonne.
Hi. Yeah, I know. Yeah, thanks. Region 4 in Hong Kong.
May I ask you, Yvonne, to get closer to the mic, please?
Can you hear better?
Relatively.
Is it better now?
Relatively.
Yes.
Thank
It's
you.
better now? Okay. Yeah. In Hong Kong, I'm glad that I believe we promote it quite well for SDG. For example, right now we input the SDG in the Green Building Award for the competition. So all the architects and the related building industry consultant, they are aware about how to input the SDG for the competitions together. And at the same time, a lot of companies in Hong Kong, they are working on like green finance and also sustainable report. So they need the input of SDG in their project and in their organization. So it seems we push it a little bit hard for the past 2 years. For example, Hong Kong IA, in the Architects Association, also gather the projects in Hong Kong and prepare a book. And then I think we launched 1 year ago for that book to showcase the project that have SDG input, yes, in Hong Kong. So if for the implementation of the building, as we heard before, most of building right now is steel and concrete. So and also has many high-rise tall building and quite in that. So lately we promote MIC. The boxes that we like build in the adjacent regions and then send it back to Hong Kong. So less than we save a lot of other energies and power. So it's kind of another type to promote sustainability. Yes, I prepared some PowerPoint, maybe can share after another round of the discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Yvonne. We were happy to launch with you the Hong Kong Sustainable Development Goals Guidebook last year. in Copenhagen Congress with the UAE.
Yes.
It's quite
Yes.
comprehensive and very useful for the whole region. And we have Hassan to represent the perspective of Region 5 with us. Hassan, please.
Hello, everyone. Do you hear me?
Yes,
Yes, we
perfectly.
can.
Iman,
Yes, we can.
Perfectly, yeah.
you hear me? Nice to see Nabil again and Jihad, of course. Thank you so much, dear colleagues. I think we should think in a more comprehensive way. Doesn't mean we are among architects, we'll be talking about SDGs for architecture. It doesn't work like that. I think Jihad used a key term, metabolism. We cannot reach a holistic metabolism or synergizing a metabolism because what is sustainability? It's not the veneer that after we destroyed everything by industrialization and now we are coming with a veneer of sustainability. I mean, industrialized countries created major problem in the global north that the global south is assuming the consequences of these. So doesn't mean the remedies of the global north cities will be applied automatically to the global south. And hence, we have a major problem, for instance, in Africa and Asia. The rate of urbanization in Africa, the highest, because you have a high rural communities, they are still resilient, while we are importing this modern urban planning formula that created a misbalance between communities and their localities. So this question of aligning between people's aspirations within their own context to devise these own intrinsic sustainable solutions rather than exported solutions. So in Africa, we are still suffering with that. I mean, which kind of cities for Africans that are still rural? And of course, if you say the rate of urbanization is high, if I give you just some examples. But before giving you these examples, please bear in mind, metropolises, they started in the global north, but now are in the global south. Major mega cities now are not anymore in Europe or North America. They are in Asia and Africa, with cities like Tokyo, around 30 million. Or let's say the projections in Africa by 2035, Cairo will be 30 million. Lagos will be 25 million. Luanda, Dar es Salaam, around 15 million. So we are talking here about a major phenomenon of urbanization with high population density and with meager, weak infrastructure. So hence the question of multi-scale interventions are needed. And in this way, we cannot keep ourselves architects maneuvering at the scale of 1 to 100 at the level of the building, and we are creating actually a metabolism, a sustainable one. Like for instance, every city, every building is designed by an architect, regularized and authorized to be built. But the sigma of all these buildings, though they are authorized, they are not creating the right built environment or sustainable urban landscape. So therefore, what kind of SDGs to be applied to reach this kind of interactive layers? And of course, multi-actors. I will underscore this point, multi-actors or multi-sectorial. Most of the governments in Africa and Asia, they are very unilateral. Sector of education, separate. Sector of health, separate. Sector of agriculture. We cannot reach the SDGs without having this multi-sectorial, multi-scale strategic planning that would not create only bureaucratic top-down urban planning for cities. Forget about the Athens Charter, forget about La Ville Radieuse of Le Corbusier, and now I think, and I would end by one little detail that was mentioned before, like for instance in Africa, which is so shocking. Do you know that it's prohibited to build in earth in most countries in Africa, though it has a tradition of building in clay and earth, and I think John Owen Lewis was correct. when addressing the question of timber. So hence, I will bring one last point. The role of universities, they should be brought back to city planning, which really there is actually a gap between innovation and research about smart materials, about system and construction systems, about the circular economy. And this cannot be actually designed by an architect. It's impossible, though we are among a circle of architects. Impossible. We need to be multidisciplinary. We need to be able to dismantle complex systems of cities and buildings, and we need to think holistic for a new vision that set up an embedded metabolism, or not embedded actually. This is my definition of resilience. Resilience is not just facing catastrophes, but resilience also is the immune system. What kind of boosting of immune system for buildings, for cities, for neighborhoods, for green landscapes, all the living ecosystem of cities and buildings, we need to revisit all these elements in order to address properly the SDGs and not look at the SDGs in a fragmented way. I would like to thank Iman and Nabil, because they are not actually asking us to deal with SDG 11. This is what sometimes makes me upset. You architects, you need to maneuver within 11. You health, you need to maneuver the objective. It doesn't work like that. We need to see what are the interactions between all sectors, and of course, all around resources, water, energy, earth or materials, and of course, how can we re-establish a living, sustainable ecosystem, cities, buildings, and they are just like part of that. And we cannot actually just think about mere design. Design will not solve the problem, period, okay? You know, design is not a recipe for dreaming around with circular glasses. Doesn't work like that. You know, design needs to be revisited as an embedded process of creative communities devising their own solutions within their own context around resources to create a sustainable living human establishments. And thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you, Hassan. Well, the majority of our panelists have already answered my second question.
Yes,
But
Iman,
let me-
this is really interesting because this question you have raised earlier about, you know, the one related to an extra SDGs. I
Yes,
think, yes, if you'd like to address, it's really interesting to follow up with this point that Hassan has just raised.
yes, let it be the fruit of the conversation by the end.
Mm.
But now, my next question is related to the community involvement. So how can we better engage local communities to ensure the successful initiation of these essential projects or SDGs in the planning phase? Owen, please.
Let me, perhaps since I started off the last time, perhaps someone else might like to lead on this. I would say that I must say I agreed a lot with what Hassan was saying, the need for taking this holistic view of the subject, and I would emphasize that the point I was trying to make in talking about an initiative to advance the use of timber construction in Ireland was not in any way suggest we all build in timber. No, the issue was about regionalism. That's there's a lot of experience in Northern Europe. There isn't much experience in my country. In Southern Europe, it may not be relevant as a technology, but we do know that we need to reimagine our buildings in materials other than steel and concrete if we are to achieve the objectives of carbon neutrality and so on. And the process of doing so, of changing the local culture of buildings, involves many different people, way beyond the architect, but including the architect. So that at the moment we have, I think we have 4 ministries. We have the industry, we have the architectural profession, all working together, something like 60, in my small country, something like 60 organizations and experts and so on working together to address the issues that involved in this cultural, technological and industrial transition from steel and concrete towards timber. It's not a universal solution. It's particularly relevant to the region, but I think the approach, the methodology is of relevance to the discussion of the Sustainable Development Goals and how do we advance those. Thank you.
Thank you. When I see Jihad is willing to respond.
Regarding local community engagement, I believe there's two dimensions here. First, there's the word local, and then there's the word engagement. And on these 2 points, I believe there's two issues to discuss. On the first, regarding the local, and going back on the question that was raised by Hassan, the necessity to go beyond the sectorial approaches. In fact, it's at the local level that we can be the most transversal. And beyond the community itself, or at the heart of the community, I believe there's the municipalities, the local authorities. And it's interesting, myself, I'm a bit biased at this point because I work within a network of 650 municipalities within the Arab region. So of course, I'm a bit biased, and I favor the entry point of municipalities, because I feel at the local level and under the municipal, let's say, prerogative, which is more transversal. We're working on a certain area, but we're working on all the aspects of this certain area. I believe giving more prerogative to municipalities, giving them more role and capacity development and funds and resources, of course, will help a lot in dealing with a lot of these transversal issues we've been mentioning. Regarding also the community engagement part, I believe it's even more than community participation, what we need. What we need is really community partnership. And I can give one example of a project that we are working on now. I like a lot the modality of the urban living labs. The urban living lab concept is bringing a set of, let's say, a group of different cities, a group of different universities to develop pilots on a particular type of problem or a particular type of issues, and then seeing how we can learn from this and spread this kind of innovation. And one of the projects we're developing now is on participatory greening of neighborhoods. In the Arab region and Middle Eastern region, the question of greening of cities is very important, obviously, with the question of heat, with the question of lack of water. So how do you green a city? And let's say municipalities and local authority face a major challenge at this level, especially at the level of the neighborhoods. They will usually go for big parks. They will usually go for a canopy along the main streets, but going into the neighborhood is more complex because operationally it will require to, let's say, have employees go and do maintenance, daily maintenance into the greening of the different neighborhood. You need land within the neighborhood to grow. So this is a big challenge to greening the neighborhoods. So what we are proposing, the urban lab that we're working on, is basically how we can get the local community and its diverse profile from association to inhabitants, but also the private sector, the local private sectors, that how they can be partner, taking in charge the maintenance of the greening space, how we can also use the private space that overlooks the street as a greening to green the city. This will require going into legal aspects. This will require going into a technical aspect, but it is at this level, at this junction, that we can really promote different models, and we can go beyond, let's say, sectorial aspects of dealing with things. So this is my thought on this.
Thank you, Jihad. And we move to Hassan. Hassan?
Okay, just
No, you're
microphone.
muted.
Do you hear me? You hear me,
Yes, we
Iman?
can. We
Iman?
can now.
Yes, yes, please. Thank you. I think this issue of community, Iman, it's quite complex. I think it's not just about sustainability. It's all about also the practice of modern urban planning that discarded the essence of human establishment, that is the community. I remember of a beautiful writing or a exchange between CERT, who they started SIAM, the International Congresses of Modern Architecture, of course, and sending, what do you think, Athens Charter, that is actually behind all the modern urban planning? And then Manford from the US said, oh my goodness, I see that you are devising a document that would push cities to be so technocratic, so bureaucratic, so top down. I have the
Hassan, I think there is a technical problem at your end.
way the letter to Ensenal of utility, we reach a level where we are claiming
Do
back
the
the
others
community,
experience
bringing
the
back.
same challenge?
Of course, yeah. I mean, by the way, I mean, Europe discarded discarded the modern urban planning. Most now the UK, it's a beautiful example, though they have their own defects, but actually we are still actually in the, like Jane Jacobs said, we are still in the checkerboard urban planning, this orthogonality, rigid, and especially with the French system that we have, ordonnance, alignement, all about order, all about facades, all about that. So I think the community, not only participative approach to bring a bureaucratic plan to discuss with them, what do you think? This is what it means, participative approach now. It's not that. Now I give you an example. We're working on two rural establishments. I would share the screen quick. I will be briefed. Did you see the screen? Do you
Yes,
see my
we can.
screen? Yes, okay. So this is actually this mega campus where I am. You could see it's a Ricardo Bofill beautiful project of a green, of the campus within a green city, but next to it, there are some rural communities, you could see them. So what I did with the team in my, like I have 4 research labs, and 1 research lab is about integrative, sustainable territorial planning in rural establishments. This actually, the thesis, we are not starting by the orthogonal fully designed, but we are starting by 350 years human establishment, and with actually rehabilitating a school, we created a lab for the community, and we've been co-designing with them their own plan, not our plan, architects or planners, and it worked. I mean, for 2 years, working with a very high performance kind of interaction with the community member, all the ages, young people, etc., elderly, of this rural community that may seem poor, but it's not poor. It's poor from the physical standard, but from the cultural social standard, they are very high. So Jihad was talking about metabolism. So the metabolism, the living metabolism of rural establishments can teach us about what means community involvement, because this, and sometimes I hate this term, vernacular. I hate this term vernacular because we are actually the developed, we are the civilized, and there are some people vernacular, they are instinctive, they are doing things with instinct, which is actually ridiculous. Centuries of people doing their own homes, doing their own shelters, and they are gathering around their own spaces to create public spaces. So it's not something like a Roman military camp that we are duplicating everyone in orthogonality of cities, but we need to respect local communities' aspirations, the way they want their space to be it private, public, semi-public, etc. So to cut the story short, what I'm trying to say, we need to revisit, Iman, the notion of community. Community is not just like voices in elections. No, community is culture. Community is a sense of memory. I'd like to use the term, the Greek term, not technology, techne. Techne is the techniques adopted by a community and they become part of their culture. So the genius loce or the know-how, local know-how, is not anymore just folkloric for the artisanal, but needs to be revived with the lens of technology to enhance the or sustainable functions or sustainable spaces. So hence, actually, community is key. And when we talk about neighborhoods is another level. Neighborhoods are needed now in modern cities because modern cities, they have just modern social housing. And you know, Iman, in Cairo or in Casablanca is a major problem in all Africa. Urbanization in Africa is becoming an urbanization of housing, ghetto of social housing. So how can we go to the community to reestablish the sense of neighborhoods, but within the neighborhoods, we should not forget the other activities, work, education, health, etc., in order that the city get back to its community rather than to be jungle of concrete boxes and an infrastructure for cars. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hassan. I think Yvonne is also willing to answer.
Oh, yes. Can I share some images?
Sure.
Yes. Can you see it?
Yes, we can.
Oh, yes. I just want to share how in the community design in high rise in Hong Kong. This one is like what we say when we heard just urban living lab. It actually is a co-living building, and then is for the young people. They can live together, and they have the central area as a community space. So to to collect all the people, as you can see, they can do like library. They have band space. They have a different type of community space. Before the design, in fact, there are a lot of engagement workshop that work with the people there. The building actually in the science park. So they have a lot of community, engagement workshop before design. So as you can see, using the raising up as a concept, and also, in fact, I heard about timber building. It is quite in Hong Kong, the regulations are quite stringent. Until now, we don't have the timber building as what you mentioned. Yeah, like the engineered timber building still not exist because of the regulations. I hope that, of course, later on we can have it. Yeah, but as you can see, we try our best. We put the community space at the middle, and all the other side, the free part, in fact, is MIC. All the building, as I mentioned before, is prefab, and also with all the finishes have been done, and then come to site to put them together. So this MIC method can save a lot of energy and also carbon for the construction. So as I heard, also understand the SDG is not only building or the architects can do it. In fact, it's quite collab with different parties. So as you can see, even the building and also different part, we have some different investigation before. There are several buildings. I think I just put this one first. So thank you.
Thank you, Yvonne. And we finish with pieces. I'm not sure if you have finished, Yvonne. I'm sorry about that.
I finished. Yeah,
Okay.
I tried to stop sharing. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, thank you. And we finish with the thesis. Hassan, do you have your hand raised, or this is from the previous answer?
Yeah.
Okay, let's start with thesis now.
Sure. I think your question about civil participation is very important. In the West, that is to say, Europe and the Americas, I think at every level, including municipal, regional, and national, there is growing ideological polarization because, among other factors, sustainable development has been politicized and therefore compromised. This severely impacts the social contracts that permit development and the implementation of the SDGs. So I think countries and municipalities need to invest in strengthening social contracts and unity. SDGs strategy have their limitations and challenges. Developed nations didn't achieve such status of being developed following these guidelines. Specifically, this set of principles can aid societies that have a sustainable contract, social contract that allow for them to endure in time. I say this because of this situation of polarization. The enduring political schism in countries and cities of the region like Brazil and Argentina mirrors that of the United States and other territories around the world. To give you an example, for the last couple of years, something unthinkable not long ago was taking place in New York, Texas, and Washington, D.C. at city and state levels, far from harnessing the potential of belonging to a greater union, as defining as it can be. These territories are exercising levels of autonomy to rival and challenge other on political grounds like never before in terms of human rights, immigration, governance, energy, and the environment. As we all know, politics expressed as partisan disagreement play a fundamental role in this territorial rivalry, which could be marking a new zeitgeist because this is not happening in isolation. Polarization due to competing and irreconcilable visions of national identity and regional and city identity is also trending around the world, for more often seen among developing countries. Some years ago, a Pew Research Center study showed that 19 developed countries showed 65% of adults considered that there are strong or very strong disagreements in their countries between people who support different political parties. So I think that before we deal with the improvement of sidewalks and parks and how to implement new urbanism guidelines, we need to sit on the table of social contract, identify how is it that division is being created inside societies in urban territories, and we need to invest in unity. And this climate of unity allows for the bricks to be laid one upon the other, but the opposite does not work, as we all know.
Thank you, Jesus. Before moving to the next question, I do acknowledge that some of the audience would like to ask the panelists, but may I ask them to wait till the end because we cannot interrupt the flow of the webinar now. Moving to the next question is about evaluating barriers to implementation. So to better understand why certain projects remain unrealized, our next question will be about what are the common barriers. For example, funding, policy issues, community resistance. I know that some of you has highlighted some of these points, but let us focus about these barriers that can hinder the realization of these projects. What solution can help overcome these barriers? So we open the floor. Maybe some of you have already answered the question, but if you would like, I can move to the last question within this cycle. It's about collaboration among the key actors. What role can international organizations, we are one of them, NGOs and the private sector, play in ensuring the fruition of the most needed projects? Jihad, please.
Yeah, going back on the barriers, I believe it also depends. Okay, there's general barriers that face that we've been talking about more in general, which is the lack of transversality, the issue of disciplinary bias that that we have in a lot of aspects, etc., etc. But it also, since we're talking about different SDGs, each one has also its own types of barriers. For example, when we deal with water and the city, this is one issue I've been a lot interested in, and I feel one of the aspects that that are there to just to give an example is in a lot of cases cities think in terms of, let's say, land use, in terms of planning of the surface of a city, while water, in a lot of cases, is dealt with by technical agencies that think in terms of hydrology, that thinks in terms of networking. And these two languages often do not speak to each other, and the prerogatives are fragmented among these different actors. So if we and this leads to a situation, for example, where, and I've seen this in a lot of cases, where planners might choose to put industrial areas, etc., in lands that might lead to the pollution of underground water. It's not because the planner is not interested in preserving the environment. It is simply because he's not knowledgeable about issues of, let's say, the soil permeability, for example, or these kind of questions. So a certain transversality at this level is very important, and having some kinds of authorities that go transversal on an issue in a certain location. This is again why I'm insisting on the role of municipalities in this regard is important. In other issues, for example, when we talk about food, food is very important for cities, and as I said, the only big solution that is there for cities that have face shortages of food is basically to import more, or to bring more food from other areas. And also because the solution to issues of food is usually presented as something of related to national food security, and the response should be within the agricultural sector. And so authorities that are in charge of cities do not feel interested to move on this particular front. Though more and more, for example, we see initiatives to develop food policies, urban food policies. For example, the Milan Food Policy Pact and other types of initiatives that goes into this direction to show that there's an important role for cities to address these kind of particular questions. So I just wanted to stress this important barrier, in fact, to dealing with the SDGs.
Thank you, Jihad. Actually, we wanted to explore the potentiality of SDG 17, which is dealing with partnership for the goals, when we raised this question. But we do know that other SDGs are related to the same question, especially the one that you were raising, Jihad. So, Jesus, the floor is yours.
Yeah, yeah, I think for there to be a more advanced pace of implementation of the SDGs, institutions like this one, the UIA, could help create awareness among local governments and countries, but funding as well from international funding agencies are key. In the last decade, the region has already attracted significant funding from international financial institutions. For example, by 2021, the Inter-American Development Bank announced a record-breaking $23.5 billion in financing for Latin America and the Caribbean. The previous year as well, 2020, was also record-breaking with almost 22 billion. According to the UN Environment Programme, the region depicts a comparatively cleaner energy matrix. Energy is key, and clean energy is a decisive factor in the development of our cities and countries. It's embedded within the SDG as well. And our energy matrix showed to be comparatively cleaner, largely due to investment in large-scale hydroelectric projects in the last 10 years. But the percentage of renewable energy in the project, in the power matrix, decreased by almost 8% between 2000 and 2016. And it takes even more availability and access to capital to build infrastructure for clean energy, from which many other development guidelines derive. There exists, to cite another issue, a growing environmental awareness among urban voters that catalyze change towards more sustainable city models around the region. And this has led to investment in climate action plans and urban infrastructure to improve the people's quality of life and their connection to nature. A good example of this comes to my mind, the green corridors of Medellin, for example, and many of the investments that are being carried out right now in historic centers around Latin America.
Thank you, Jesus. To add to your answer also, we can see it very clearly when we are attending the COP28 last year representing the UAE. We've seen billions of dollars on the table just for the right proposals from different countries globally. So I do share your opinion, Jesus. And we move to Owen.
Thank you, Amat. It seems to me that when you ask us what are the common barriers, to my mind, I would highlight two. One is political and one is economic, but actually they are related. In the European region, we have a practice of having elections at 4 or 5 yearly intervals. The SDGs require a timescale which extends more than a single political cycle. That presents fundamental difficulties, where we see in increasing, for instance, the European Union sets targets, objectives in order that we can reach what has been globally agreed as the objective of the 2050 carbon neutrality and so on, and the objectives in the SDGs. In trying to address your question, what solutions or how we tackle this, we set targets, we set legislative targets which exist beyond the life of a single government. But there are major political problems in persuading the electorate, persuading the community that often members of the community struggling to survive today, it's not so easy to persuade them that to take this longer term perspective. And not unrelated, the economic issue. I'm not an economist, of course, but the economic science or the art of economics seems extraordinarily to focus on the current costs. And these are artificial and they're also within limited boundaries. The SDGs all the time seek us to widen the boundaries of our analysis. It's not enough to look at the costs of production. We have to look at the externalities, the impacts, the real costs of producing materials and commodities and so on. And so I would look to a real economic analysis which looks at the whole life cycle and assesses value over that sort of timescale. So that has to be the response, I think, to the often totally inadequate economic analyses that are applied today, looking at short-term analysis without looking at the whole life, which is, I think, so fundamental to the Sustainable Development Goals. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Owen. And we finish with Hassan, please.
Thank you, Iman. Do you hear me, please?
Yes, we do.
Do you hear me? Yes, I think let's follow up with John Owen Lewis. Actually, let's start by the barriers. I think one thing that we need to consider with SDGs, we are trying to conduct a positive change towards an outcome reaching sustainable territories, cities, buildings, etc. The first thing we need to do, since I am very involved from the top level of the state to the very project, first thing is to change mindsets, because it's not easy to change mindset about common practices. People, leaders, private, public, they are used for the last 2 decades to conduct projects in a certain manner. So therefore, how to sensitize, how to, the first thing. The second thing is transforming the processes of doing things, which is not easy to do, because within the policy strategies, there are practices embedded the way we do things at the level of government or municipalities, NGOs, etc. So a whole shift of paradigm is to be embraced in order to move to tools, mediums, methodologies. And that would take time. And other barriers, of course, regulations. When we talk about a holistic view at the level of a state or level of a city, always there are regulations. Some of the regulations are obsolete, or some new regulations they need to be added. Like hydraulic stress now everywhere, like the issues of materials and how we need to rethink the use of materials, the question of food security. So there are a lot of issues dealing with the well-being of communities worldwide. They are actually enshrined within a regulatory system that is harming itself. Regarding now the role of international organization like the International Union of Architects, I think the role is critical. The role is strategic. This, I remember I was one of the experts who devised documents with Raf Toots with UN Habitats called International Guidelines of Urban and Territorial Planning before even SDGs, I think 1 year or 2 years. And we were rethinking what are the strategic orientations of international planning. Planning can be social planning, urban planning, territorial planning. So therefore, going back to planning, prospective, in order to find smart solutions to reach the target with all the smartness we have now. And they think the international organizations, their role is critical. Another document, for instance, and this kind of, not only documents, by the way, written by experts. These experts, they are like, our gathering today, thank you, Iman and Nabil, we are representing different regions. So we are voicing up what's happening globally through these ambassadors. So therefore, these documents, like the document by UNESCO that was edited by Francisco Bandari about the role of culture in sustainable urbanization. Like, for instance, the sector of culture have been epitomized in museums and artifacts, and we forgot about the living cultures, the living heritage in making cities more cultural. Cultural doesn't mean high culture like Bourdieu, but actually the culture of the communities needs to be brought back to the cities. Who would voice these elements? Actually, international organizations. So therefore, I commend for what International Union of Architects is doing, and thank you for this panel, and thank you all my colleagues around. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you, Hassan. By Hassan's intervention, I reached the end of this cluster of questions, And back to Nabil for the second one.
Thank you, Iman, very much, and thank you, my dear colleagues. Right now, we are moving to category number 2, successful projects and future replication. And I'm really curious that when we present a successful project, how we learn from it, and whether it's really needed to replicate that success or not. I would like to ask this question, how we learn from projects, because there are a lot of webinars, there are a lot of ebooks, there are a lot of online resources with successful projects, but at some point there is a problem how we learn from them. So I'm just this is my first question for the successful project. If yes, Owen, if you'd like to start or share your thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you, Nadeem and Nabi. If I may take region 1, Europe is sometimes referred to as the old world, and I'm among the more senior of those present on the panel, at least. Let me take as an example how in Europe we sought to change the architecture culture. Since this is a meeting of architects, I can offer a perspective which goes back nearly 50 years rather than 20 years. Maybe what I will try and do is share my screen again, if I may.
Yes, please.
Is that visible?
Yep. Yes.
Our starting point in the later decades of the last century now was one where a dominant style of architecture was the international style, which from our perspective today, of course, is a nonsense. The idea, in a way, it's a style for climate deniers, that you could make a building in Cairo just as you might make it in Cork. It doesn't make sense. Glass boxes, which essentially defy their local environment. The European program sought to change, and quite explicitly and deliberately sought to change this. And you see a range of publications which were produced there. The climate dwelling, energy conscious design was one of the earlier ones. Solar architecture was a name for the program, but solar isn't probably it's a shorthand, let's say. The Green Vitruvius is probably has the biggest impact, in the sense that was translated to many languages and went into second edition. So publications were one, and remember, it's of the time. We wouldn't do this now, but these had a purpose. A second strand was suitcases of teaching materials. In pre-internet days, we delivered slides and poster exhibitions and so on, because of course in Europe we're dealing with many languages, so there was an emphasis on the graphical content. So each suitcase particular to a building type, so residential buildings or school buildings and so on. And another strand in this concerted effort, which was rooted in research programs now, not in dissemination or whatever, was to organize a series of architectural ideas competitions, which in turn looked at one or other of the themes. So we would say solar heating, daylighting. Working in the City is a book publishing the results of that competition. Daylighting. Zephyr was natural ventilation and cooling, and Living in the City was a competition focused on refurbishment, retrofit. So we had a series of measures like this, and perhaps the most ambitious part of the program was to get researchers working with distinguished architects. So for instance, we put a substantial budget into the Reichstag, so to allow researchers work with Sir Norman Foster and his team on the refurbishment of the Reichstag, on heat pumps, taking heat from the river, on daylighting to the main chamber, and so on. Or another example, Portcullis House, you might recognize it on Westminster Bridge in London, where Michael Hopkins and partners and Arup engineers, the collaboration was on the design of the skin of this building, which was located, of course, in a heavily polluted urban environment. And the intention was to minimize the use of mechanical services in this, so to enhance daylighting and particularly natural ventilation in this building. These were just two of a whole series. The Acropolis Museum in Athens, two buildings in Potsdamer Platz, all over Europe with I mentioned Norman Foster, Richard Rogers, Renzo Piano, and so on. So you get a sense of the high profile, looking at essentially solar technologies and how do you advance these. Now, how do we know that this has worked? Well, in a way, it benefited the research programs very considerably because the researchers were looking informed by real design issues. Architects have an extraordinary faith, for instance, when you draw a colored arrow on a drawing, that the air is going to move in that direction, but physics may not permit. How do we know? Because today, these ideas of natural ventilation, of daylighting and so on, are mainstream. They're not special. They're not solar architecture. They're part of so they have entered into the culture of architectural design. Now, of course, the job isn't finished. And so the European Union will use, or is using, additional approaches like the new European Bauhaus, for instance, to advance things, a whole series of things, levels as a way of getting a little more quantitative about sustainability. It's very easy to be at risk of greenwashing. We need to get rather more particular, and of course, ultimately through regulations. And we have a new directive, the Energy Performance in Buildings Directive, which will require us to look at the embodied energy, embodied carbon in our buildings on a timescale which starts in 2027 or so, but some member states will bring that forward. And this is a very effective way of advancing the goals of specific sustainable development objectives. That's my illustration of one.
Yeah, thank you very much. So if I understand more, we need to understand the genotype of the things, not the phenotype, not just the outside issues, because sometimes people are presenting the projects as if it's like checklist of SDGs. Okay, I fulfilled 1, 2, 9, whatever, and this is a successful project. When they addressed this issue in this way, it's really hard to understand how could I, in my country, replicate this success, or understanding the in-depth issue about how to implement it in my country or my neighborhood or whatever the scale is. So thank you for highlighting this point that we need to go to the in-depth, not just the project, but what's behind the project, right?
I think that's right. Yes, to integrate the architectural, since we're talking an architectural audience, the architectural perspective on how we make better buildings, and of course neighborhoods, and the community dimension of these as well. But I focused on the individual building because I think we have a coherent story to tell, which extended it's not an overnight thing. I mean, this is something like 30 years work. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And I see Hassan has raised his hand if you'd like to discuss this point. And then we're going to have Young. Yes, Hassan, please.
Do you hear me? Hello?
Yeah.
I'm sorry to keep saying, do you hear
No,
me?
no,
Because I
we are
don't
hearing you
know
perfectly.
how the network works. I'd like to thank John, my colleague John and Luis. I think he dealt with this question of best practice at the building level, but actually from a record, I commend him for this interdisciplinary research, innovation, action, or let's say like industrial research, R&D. I think without research and innovation, coupled with the design process, I think is crucial to prompt or to generate new examples, good examples of projects. We can never have best practice by, as you underscored, Nabil. Given, for instance, in a design studio, 17 NDGs to students and ask them, please, could you, or even a group of architects saying, oh, you have 17 NDGs, could you please apply them and get me out a best practice of a good sustainable project or sustainable city? It doesn't work like that. So we need to think also about, the meta nature of SDGs. These are transnational orientations in the metaphysical level. You cannot take 17 SDGs at this meta level and then take them to the technical board and you can design a best practice project. No. And this question of a good project or a pilot project or a good example, it reminds me also of our history, idealist cities or ideal cities. I mean, the Greenwich, and of course with Ebenezer Howard and all the previous generations, they were always thinking what would be the best project, what would be the best practice. But some of the best practices, they became the cause of the wrong practices, like the green city concept. It was good, but afterwards became negative. So we need to be very careful from the SDGs, 17 SDGs. That means we will distill or we deduce best practice. What I would say, what kind of angle of attack are we dealing with policies and strategies? We can have a good policy, but the way is implemented is also a good practice, dealing with territorial planning, urban planning, regional planning, architectural design. So I think the scale is very important vis-a-vis the complex system, working within that realm or within that scale. So when we do that, then we can dare say we have actually a good way to conduct a sustainable project or sustainable practice, but doesn't mean it's an ideal practice. And always we need to be humble. How far the project would actually apply sustainability values, principles, ideals to reach a certain partial outcome? Because yet now, where we are standing to 2024, we don't have yet 100% absolute sustainable project. It doesn't exist. Nabil, you were in the UAE when they were talking about Masdar, zero carbon, and ended up never. You cannot even dream of having zero carbon city. It's impossible. So I would cut the story short. I just say what we need before we talk about best practices, what kind of indicators or KPIs that we should set for a project, be it an architectural project, be it, and which jihad to help municipalities, we need people who are really not just experts, visionary experts, to set up some of the indicators at different scales, just to help decision makers, policies, to reach a certain sustainability values. I'm saying values, not absolute rules, because sustainability
Hassan, maybe the internet is interrupted at your side.
If you give it to politicians, they will become itself hindering, of being value. It would hit kind of design practices, what kind of mindset, and then we need to set up kind of framework for some projects, and we alarm everyone. They are not ideal, they are not absolute, they are not best practice. They are each one partially responding to sustainability, like energy efficiency, or maybe the questions of materials, the question of design, what kind of integrative design, multi-layered, that addresses all elements of the building rather than the aesthetic, play, etc. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hassan. And we're going to Ivona and Jesus and then Jihad. Yes, please.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah.
Hello.
Is the volume okay?
Yes, but we did
Yes.
kindly
Okay.
just the voice is a little bit low. If you can just speak louder, if I may ask.
Yeah, I try my best. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah. I think SDG only have 17 numbers, but in fact, we can expand a lot of thinking and make it bigger and better and better. For example, number 7 is called energy, right? How the energy we can have more affordable and also quite reliable, yeah, something like that. Solar energy is renewable energy, so everybody, like the whole world right now, is seeking how to make it better. I can share some in the design and study right now in China. They are not only using solar panels. They're thinking how to store the energy to make it better and directly used to the in the machine or appearance. So they have a term like called in Chinese there are 4 characters. Solar, from the sky. We got the solar. How to store it is the number 2 step, and then they store it, and then how to use it in DC to directly to the inside the building or the appearance, and then they make the DC and AC flexible. When they use it, if they have not enough, and then they can get it from the AC. From this flexible use, they are using something like a converter. Okay. From the calculation, they said that it save 10% of the energy with using this method of the energy saving for them. So I believe that even all people will say nice solar energy, we need renewable energy, but for our behavior and also different type of storage and different type of method on different dimensions, we can save more energy, and also carbon can help a lot. So that's what even I'm thinking, even SDG only 70 numbers. In fact, each item we can have multi dimensions to think about how to make it. So.
Thank you very much. I like the way of multidimensioning point. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
So Jesus, if you'd like to share your point of view.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with Hassan's valuation of SDGs as being a part of a metaphysical structure. I think SDGs are the letter of a intangent principle that has to be revised with every generation and with every context. And as for the accomplishment of SDGs within buildings and within architectural realm, I must say that buildings are not autonomous entities in any way possible. They might acquire certain levels of autonomy as we grow in our understanding of technology and development. But we need to address the accomplishment of SDGs and what they mean, what the spirit of themselves as letters of the law mean, by relating buildings with the system they pertain to. So we need to also address how sustainable are urban infrastructures connected to our buildings, so we can state positive reports about how our buildings are meeting SDGs. So we need to have a look at systemic complexity around architecture, even cities, to be able to assess how sustainable a city is. We need to relate it to regions and to country systems. So this is about observing the big picture here.
Thank you very much. We need also, yes, as you're saying, the big picture. So, Jihad, if you'd like to add to this point.
Yeah, I believe that I want to go back to your question related to how we can look into a project and learn from a certain project. In fact, again, as I said, personally, I work within a network of different cities, and one of the things we do is we map practices. We are very interested in looking into what different cities are doing regarding different sectors and different types of projects. Now, once you have this kind of mapping, and Owen mentioned they've been working through different publication, for example, to a certain time, and he mentioned if now they might use different formats or different way of doing this. I want to share one example of a different way of doing this. So I'll try to share my screen. I don't know if you're able to see my screen.
It's coming. Yes, we can see it right now.
Yeah, so one of the things that not only us, but a lot of international organizations are working on is the development of portals that showcase projects. And in fact, what we have done here, because we work at the level of, let's say, the Arab region, I'm having problem here a little bit, yeah. At the level of the Arab region is mapping projects, organizations, publications, cities related to urban development within the Arab region. So this is a project that started like a few months ago. And just to give you examples of what type of outputs, for example, of projects we have, from large projects of afforestation in such city where we have a description, then some pictures and maps and information about the stakeholders, about the process, and projects links and references for people to go beyond the information we have. And as I said, it could go from something that has been a landmark like the Azhar Park in Cairo to other smaller intervention or newer intervention, etc., or just urban development master plans from different areas from the region. And we believe that this kind of modality is very, this is what municipalities are looking for, in fact. They want to see other cases, other examples. I'll stop sharing here. They want to see other cases, other examples from around the world, from around the region. And since you mentioned WWOOF, we're holding a session in WWOOF with other similar portals. So we're organizing a session where we will have, for example, the youth platform, which is a global one, a Connective Cities platform, Guangzhou Awards platform. So these map different types of projects from around the world. Each has its own methodology, the way they approach project, the way they recognize project. What we do ourselves, we try not to have a value entry in looking at these projects. Of course, we have in our background SDGs and other factors in looking at the project, but in showcasing the project and bringing the information, we try to be as, let's say, informative as possible, because this is the material from which a discussion could emerge. This is just a starting point that will help, for example, get different municipalities, different group of people who are interested within the same subject to push to a more elaborate conversation. But I believe mapping is something that's very important. It's true that today we can find a lot of information through the internet and AI platforms and all of this. But having structured databases about projects is one way to move, one important way to move forward. So.
Yes, thank you for this information and informative issues. And we are looking forward also to all the participants in the World Urban Forum in Egypt. It's really a good opportunity, so we can all discuss all points. Let me move to the almost last question, but not least, is about the implemented projects, which between brackets, the SDGs. I mean, I know that most cities, they're trying to focus on some SDGs rather than the entire issues. So I would like to learn from you from different regions, which SDG that you are focusing more. I know that you might focus on others less, but what's actually the SDG that you're really interested in dealing with just the cities and all its component, the water issues, the food, the poverty, or I mean, what actually your main focus? Because we from this point we might have a clue where are the SDGs that are a little bit left behind or are not that much being focused on. So if anyone would like to share his or her idea. Yes, please, Joseph, please.
Well, I think SDG 11 for sustainable cities is an overarching principle, and it's worth paying attention to and investing time and effort into its accomplishment, because as I was trying to explain before, when you improve the quality of life of people in cities by improving cities' infrastructure, you create an economic climate, a positive economic climate, a dynamic economic climate that brings with it new private investment, brings and new levels of employment, and this means more jobs for people and more economic capacity to afford basic services on the part of the population. And that also brings more tax revenues to cities and governments, so they can also invest orderly in the welfare of people. So investing in our cities is a key factor to improving and to tackling the challenges described and inscribed in the other SDGs that had to do with people's quality of life, the economy, jobs, and also the environment, because sustainable cities mean also a friendly relation to the ecology around. So there are many, many issues that are being addressed when we foment sustainable cities.
Thank you very much, Yvonne.
Hi, yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. I think we more on in Hong Kong, we more on promote sustainable building by policy, because like we have our own assessment, green building assessment called BEAM Plus. So government has a bonus promotion for the new building. If the new building, they are using the green building assessment tool, and then even not you need to have platinum, you will have 10% GFA concessions. That means to encourage developer, they are doing the building in green way. Yeah. So by this, promotion of this green building policy, like the past 10 years, many building right now, they can code that they have at least some green sustainable features, and they have a mindset input in their new buildings. So I think policy is quite, yeah, that's related to SDG 11. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much. All right. If there's no other input, I might pass the floor to my dear colleague, Iman. Yes.
Yes, like by the end, I'd like to thank all the panelists, but we still have this a very important question that we've been thinking about for the last 2 mandates. Since we started our mandate, we were thinking about the need for an 18th SDG. For instance, from our point of view, maybe we are in need for a certain SDG only dedicated to architecture and urban planners, something that merge all our concerns and reveal all our potentials in the same time. So maybe you can have another perspective for this 18th. Maybe it's not that important. We didn't yet explore all the abilities of the 17 already existing. And maybe we can have other targets within every SDG that is not fully used till now. So we begin with Jihad.
Yeah, looking at the SDGs have been developed, let's say, from the period pre-2015, and they are aiming for the 2030, and they are dominated by issues of environment, justice, and climate change as one key aspect within them. I believe one aspect that is becoming more and more that has weight on the future of humanity at large and cities specifically, the angle related, and that has not been, let's say, 5-10 years ago, that has not been that clear in its importance, is the aspect related to, let's say, the role of AI, the role of these kinds of radical technologies that are coming in, and that might require a better understanding of how to deal with them, in fact, and how to use them to service. I don't have a goal regarding this, but I feel when I look into the SDGs themselves, I feel this element is not tackled enough within the SDGs. Not necessarily only AI, but the whole aspect of the digital transition. It should be like clearer as in the way we conceive it and the way we approach it, because it raises a lot of opportunities, but also a lot of challenges.
If you don't have any requests for answers, and before getting to conclude the session, we have to open the Q&As. Till now, we have only 2 questions from Seema and an anonymous attendee. The first one from Seema, if I'm pronouncing the name right: how can local governments and communities shift their mindsets to effectively integrate the Sustainable Development Goals into everyday urban policies and practices, transforming them from a mere checklist into actionable commitments that foster sustainable, inclusive, and dynamic living cities? I invite our panelists to answer if you have any comments to add. She's asking about local governments. How can they intervene to assist in the application of the SDGs, or to turn it not into a simple checklist, but to actions and commitments from the governments, from the local authorities, and so on? Can they do better than this? Jihad?
Yeah, since I've been talking about municipalities a lot, so maybe I could give a point here. It's not the idea when working with municipalities and working at the local level and how they can have a role is to move out from the idea of a project to the idea of policy. In fact, this is the main challenge, to be coherent. What we have a lot at the level of municipalities, we either have projects or we have strategies, this kind of overarching strategies that are always difficult to implement, that are always difficult to play at a high level of transversality, and usually with cities growing fast, especially in the global south. This is always something that they miss and they are not able to address. Policies, on the other hand, is larger than project. They could be larger than project in their impact because they associate a diversity of project and diversities of sector, but at the same time they are specific to a certain entry, to a certain point, to a certain goal to address. So I believe building a culture of developing different urban policies, and they can bring a diversity of actors around a certain policy, different communities around a certain policy, to be able to push for implementation.
Well, accidentally, the second question was around the same topic, so we leave it for here. I'm not sure if Fanny has another question. She was thanking us at the beginning. But just to respect the time allocated, I invite our dear colleague Nabil to wrap up everything in a brief conclusion.
Yes, thank you very much, Iman. First of all, I would like to thank you all for joining us in this webinar. It's really a pleasure and honor to listen to all of your thoughts and ideas regarding the SDGs. And of course, we thank the participants or the audience for being with us and sharing of the questions as well. As you know, that the title today was UIA and UN 17 SDGs Commission. We are dealing with Atlas of Sustainable Development Goals implementation, matrices 3+3, planning local priorities. And we focused on two issues: the unrealized projects, or the SDGs, exploring their importance, barriers of their implementations, and potential strategies for moving forward. And we have discussed successful projects and how to evaluate them, learn from them, and have some sort of a mapping dealing with them through different levels, from the micro scale, starting from the neighborhood and the responsibility of the administration of the municipalities and so forth, till we reach to the top issues. I don't want to take from your time. It's really a pleasure being here with you, and we're going to have some sort of a summary of what we have discussed and published and send it to all of you. So it's been a pleasure being with you, Iman and Sid. And if Sid is still with us.
No, Sid is targeting another plane.
Okay,
He was in the middle, in the airport.
Yeah,
just
but
to give you an idea about the rest of the steps that we're gonna take regarding this project, in the World Urban Forum, we will have a training session at the 5th of November. It's a joint session with the AIA, the American Institute of Architects, UMAR, the Union of Mediterranean Architects, the AUA, the African Union of Architects, together with Egyptian Society of Architects and the Brazilian one. We will deal with a multi factorial issues, not only our project, but we will have to have an interaction with the students, the architects, the professionals, face to face in this opportunity. We will also continue the same steps with the Kuala Lumpur Forum, the UIA Forum, at the 16th on the 16th of November in Kuala Lumpur, and moving finally to conclude this year with the COP29 in Baku, Azerbaijan. By this year, we will conclude only the first step or the first cluster of the project, and we're aiming to developing a report from the architectural point of view of how the SDGs were successful or need more challenges to be resolved by the end of this mandate in Barcelona in 2026. So we look forward to a very comprehensive report with all your help. And thank you again. I can't thank you enough. Everybody, beginning with Owen, Jesus, Jihad, Ivan, and surely Hassan. I can see him, but I know that he was facing some technical problems. Our dear Moyati from Paris headquarters of the UIA. My thanks every time to our UIA President Regina and to my colleagues Sid and Nabil. Thank you everybody for attending and looking forward for the next.